Chapter 24. God bless you all abundantly in the powerful name of our Lord and Savior. Isn't it a blessing to be set apart by God Almighty to be His chosen ones? His chosen that will finally bring peace and harmony to this fallen, sinful world. The crowd cheered, still on their feet. Their energy flowed into the monstrosity on stage, giving it even more power than it already had over them. I have a vision of the purifying flame of the truth of the Word of God going forth from me and out into the sinful night of Kansas City, going forth from His church and burning away the sinfulness of the city. Those who stand against us will be destroyed by their wickedness, for it shall be burned away, and nothing shall be left but those of us who truly are the sons and daughters of God. Those of us who have committed ourselves wholly to this ministry of chosen ones. Your souls shall be purified in the pure fire of God, and you will be white as snow. I never really got the whole white being so great bit, muttered Mike under his breath. I shrugged. He's describing one of those same visions Amanda had. Mike nodded. The color continued to leach away from the souls in the audience. Some began speaking in tongues, others convulsing and collapsing as their colors left them. And then the scene before me changed. The light became brighter, moving out from Jahziel, Jeremiah, and into those in the crowd in front of him, like puppet strings, controlling them, removing their barriers. He drew in so much light that the shadows in the corner began to darken and take on solid form. Apparently, Amanda's tulpa wasn't the only one he had helped into existence. The fears and sadness and anger of his followers, their self-doubt and self-loathing, were coalescing into concrete form around us. Mike, it's more of those same thought form things that Amanda had. I said, is this enough evidence for you? It is abomination. Mike stepped out of the shadows, away from the tulpas and into Jahziel's weird light. I held back, even though it was getting difficult to stay hidden as the thought forms became more solid along with my anger. Jahziel! Mike bellowed, and the crowd fell down on the ground as if hit by a shockwave. Jeremiah also fell, leaving Jahziel standing alone in front of the prince of the warrior angels, his boss. Jahziel stood on the stage with a look of shock on his perfect features, and then he looked beyond the archangel standing in the midst of the crowd and fixed his eyes on me. No point in hiding the shadows now. You! He yelled, and then all hell broke loose. The tulpas crawled over me, pushing me downward onto the floor, smothering me beneath them. But worse than the physical loss of breath was the overwhelming weight of the guilt, sadness, and self-loathing that they were made from. The pain of losing Amanda, knowing that I could have prevented her death, that guilt lay upon me, pushing me down and down and down. They were all over Mike now, too. I could see them crawling over every surface of the room like a sentient oil slick sliding over the floor and the ceiling. The agony in Mike's face must have echoed my own. I do not pretend to know the regrets of an archangel that has existed since the beginning of time, but I know what it is to regret the loss of a friend's life. He was there to see the fall of Lucifer and the fall of mankind itself. I managed to fight my way free enough to look towards the stage, which was still free of tulpas. The audience was standing again, giving their souls to the angel in front of us, paying us no attention at all. Jahziel was laughing, and I realized that I was witnessing the fall of another Lucifer. Only this one had created his own army of demons, not stolen them from his creator. Jahziel, Jeremiah, lifted his hand and pointed towards Mike, who was doing his best to fight through the thought forms. Behold, the angel of darkness has come to us to try to defeat us, my people. The audience began murmuring. I could see the fear there in their eyes, and the tulpas just got stronger. We must defeat him, destroy him, for he is the enemy I foretold, come to bring with him death and destruction upon us all. The congregation surged towards Mike. Mike, who could not hurt an innocent, struggled free of the tulpas, sheathed his sword, and stood silently staring in disgust at Jahziel. Jahziel, you know there is no turning back now. There can be no forgiveness, no redemption for our kind, Mike said, his form dripping with the oily stuff of human emotion. But what I do now accomplishes so much for all of them. They are all better off than they were before they came to me. They asked for this. They wanted me to deliver them from their sins. And I did. I answered their prayers. No one else would. No one but me. Did you answer Amanda's prayer? I asked, finding the strength to pull myself up to my knees. Shut up, Blackbird. You have nothing to say in this. You spawned from the fruit of sin. Disgusting little shit stain, he yelled. She wanted it, just like all of them do. Half the congregation began moving towards me. Did she ask you to make her sins solid? I asked. Did she? Because I don't think she did. She never did dig that grave, did she? There was a huge thunderclap, as if to punctuate my sentence. I could feel the wrath starting to spark in the air around me. Michael might not be able to hurt an innocent, but I wasn't an angel. And Jahziel was right. I was spawned from the fruit of sin. Half good, half evil, and the wrath was growing around me. The oily tar of the tulpas began to recede like a slug that has been touched by salt. I could feel the heat surging within me. Mike yelled something at me from within the crowd, but I couldn't hear him. I'm sure he was telling me to stop, but I couldn't. Drop the humans, Jahziel. Let them go, I said in a completely calm voice that resonated throughout the room. This is between us. Jahziel did as he was told. Jeremiah dropped to the floor with a thud, and Jahziel raised himself above the congregation, much larger and brighter than he had been before. The other humans began to drop too, one by one, and he was growing stronger and brighter, and the darkness got darker, gathering itself in a heap over Mike, who I could no longer see through the crowd and the oily tar of the tulpas. The wind outside was rattling the sheet metal on the roof. The building was creaking ominously. The heat inside me exploded outward, and so did the walls and the roof of the building, and then Jahziel was gone. The tulpas gone too. Mike was there, towering over the congregation in his energetic form, wings covering them protectively. They were completely unaware of his presence, blinded, just like most humans are, to the things beyond their understanding. They should have been thankful that he was there. In my wrath, I could give a shit if they lived or died. I only sought the destruction of the object of my anger. Thunder rolled across the open sky. The sky had turned an unnatural color, and I could see the clouds dipping down, rotating above. A moment later, the hail started, causing the congregation to panic and run over the rubble of the building for the relative shelter of the few cars not destroyed by the blast. Mike still stood there in the middle of the building with his arms crossed, towering above everything, wings spread from horizon to horizon, staring at me disapprovingly. I didn't care. You know where he went? I asked. Nope, I was hoping you had sent him to his final reward, said Mike. It doesn't work like that, I said. You know there's a lot of more paperwork involved. Mike kept glowering at me. Don't look at me like that, I said. I'm not your employee. That was your employee. He'll be looking for a weak spot between the planes so he can get out of your jurisdiction as quickly as possible, said Mike. Or another host that he can just lay low for a while, I said. Mike nodded. I could hear sirens in the distance. The clouds above stopped turning. The rain stopped falling in sheets. I'll find my own way home, I said. I need some time to think. Mike shrank back down and became corporeal again, sheathing his sword behind his back. Your choice. I'm good. I need to stretch my wings a bit. And you should get out of here before somebody sees a big, scary black dude with a sword standing in the middle of a flattened church building. Missouri police aren't the nicest guys in these situations, I said. And then I split apart into my bird bodies, flying upward and around in a cloud of consciousness above the city. I could see it now, what Jahziel had been doing, separating the light from the darkness in the people he had serving them. This was his method of dousing their soul colors. It was a step further than he had taken it with Amanda. Amanda was probably the inspiration for this army of guilt and self-loathing that he now had in his service. Amanda's tulpa had been an invention of her own mind, playing upon the seeds planted by Amnon's presence. Jahziel just fed her more reason to believe it until it became concrete. It was even warmer above the city. I could feel the updrafts ruffling the feathers of my wings, full of moisture. The clouds no longer had their greenish tinge, but instead were that weird orange-gray of reflected city lights. I flew back down towards the West Bottoms. I wanted another sandwich from that food truck. I hoped it was still there. It was. I walked the rest of the way home, a bag of fries under my arm and another chicken parmigiana sandwich in my good hand. My ear was beginning to ache. I was tired. Coming down from the wrath is worse than my worst hangovers. I was going to need to sleep tonight. I woke to a knock on the door. It couldn't be a demon if they made it close enough to actually knock, and the angelic realm didn't seem to feel the need to knock anymore at all. It didn't stop, so I dragged myself off the couch and over to the door. I looked through the window, and it appeared to be a group of 4 humans. I hoped to God they weren't here to try to convert me to some religion or other. I opened the door. Jenna was one of the 4. The other 3 looked like her, but in various ages, all slightly built. One was younger by a few years, probably around 14 or 15 years old. She carried an overstuffed Hello Kitty tote bag on her shoulder. Then an older woman in her late 40s, early 50s. Her hair was cut short and dyed fire engine red except for her bangs, which were white. She had tattoos covering her arms. The last woman was at least 80 years old, her hair gray and stringy, and she had a permanent scowl on her face. She leaned heavily on a cane made of carved wood. I saw quickly that she had no real need of it. I stood there staring at them for longer than I should. "Ray, you gonna invite us in?" asked Jenna. Yeah. Okay," I said, stepping aside to let the entourage in. "This is my Granny Bean, my Mama Sue, and my little sister Jerry Lynn," she said as they each passed by me through the door. "You got any coffee, Ray?" Yeah," I muttered, and I headed to the kitchen to make some. When I came back, they were all seated in the sanctuary, and Granny was in my recliner, crocheting a baby blanket from the yarn that was stuffed in the Hello Kitty tote Jerry Lynn had been carrying. "You Cherokee," said Granny Bean. "You look Cherokee." I looked at Jenna, and she shrugged. "No," I said. "Well, then, what is it then?" she asked. "Crow?" I said, at a loss for words. "Y'all should be back north. back Montana way," said the old woman, looking up from her knitting to stare me down. "My mamas remembered when the last of you Injuns came through long back there in the Trail of Tears. It was a damn shame." "I know the story," I said, "but I'm still here." "That you is, child, that you is. That coffee hot? I take mine sweet and light." Jenna rushed to pour her a cup and then sat down next to her mother, nudging her with her elbow and giving her a loaded glare. Her mom rolled her eyes and turned to me, where I was standing awkwardly behind the circle of chairs, feeling strangely like the unexpected guest in my own house. "We want you to know that we appreciate everything you done for Jenna and her baby, and we mean to pay you back," she said. "Jenna can't do nothing to help in her condition, but Jerry Lynn can find out and talk to your friend, and me and Granny Bean will do what needs to be done to help her if she needs it." Jerry Lynn looked at me over her cup of coffee and didn't say anything. Granny Bean stared at me too. "What all did you tell them, Jenna?" I asked. "Enough. They knows yous ain't human-type people. They know you had a friend who got killed, and they know you needs answers," she said. Granny Bean winked at me. "You been here a long time, huh, Crow?" I nodded. Granny pursed her lips. "I've been around for a long, long time, Crow. I know it gets lonelier and lonelier the longer you stay, so you must be feeling even more alone than I do. I got my babies to keep me company, and I don't think you got the comfort of any family, do you?" "No, I don't," I said. "This girl was your friend?" asked Jerry Lynn. "Yes," I answered. "And somebody killed her?" she asked. "I don't know that for sure. I know that she's dead and that she was in a lot of pain, and not all of it was her own doing." "Who hurt her?" Jerry Lynn asked, flinging back her hair from her face, bright blue eyes staring into mine intently. "Many different things. Some angelic, some demonic, some human, some my own," I explained. "She was being used then?" she asked. "Yes, just used, like a piece in a huge game," I said. "But you didn't use her like that, did you?" she asked. "No, I just used her because I wanted her friendship. That ain't using her." "That's part of being a friend, being a part of the whole," said Granny Bean. "We're all part of each other, all connected and knit together just like this here blanket. When a thread gets pulled too hard, it loosens all the rest and starts to fray and tangle. Then you gotta mend that part." I looked a little closer at them. This little family, crone, mother, and maiden, a real-life human representation of 3 other women who had sat on these same chairs a day before. What had they said? Something about things already been set in motion to repair the tapestry? A 3-fold cord? Granny smiled knowingly at me. "You know what we is talking about, don't you, Crow?" I nodded. "Then let's get down to it," said Mama Sue, standing up from the couch. "We need a clean place to work. Jenna, you start sweeping. Jerry Lynn, you start dusting. Make sure you go widdershins and not the other way, and save them dust and sweeping piles. We've been needing those." "Where's your kitchen, Ray?" she asked me. I took her downstairs, and she went to work through the pots and pans until she found a cast-iron Dutch oven in one of the drawers. "I need some salt." I found a box of salt and handed it to her. She turned on the gas stove and put the empty pot on the flame. She poured a cup of salt into the hot pan and started stirring it around with a wooden spoon. "You got any ashes?" she asked. I went outside and gathered together the small amount left from the fire when I had burned my coat, and brought them back into the kitchen. She threw them in the hot pot and continued to stir until the contents became a black powder. She removed it from the heat and went back upstairs to check on her daughter's progress. They had dusted and swept as their mother had instructed them, and piled the dust and the sweepings into a heap in the middle of the room. Their mother walked around the room checking random surfaces for dust. When she was satisfied, she went back down to the kitchen and retrieved the Dutch oven, now cooled. She placed it next to the dust pile, then scooped the dust into the pan. Granny got up and inspected the contents of the pot. "It be needin' some other things. Bring me the bag, Jerry Lynn." Jerry Lynn obeyed, and Granny Bean brought out an old cookie tin, which she opened. I expected it to be full of sewing supplies like every other old cookie tin owned by an old woman, but this was full of dried three-pronged leaves that I recognized as sassafras. She threw them into her pot and then reached into the pockets of her housecoat, where she retrieved a pack of filterless cigarettes and a hot pink plastic lighter. She lit a cigarette and then turned to Jenna. "You might be knocked up, girl, but you can make yourself useful. This pot needs something a mite savorier. Check his cupboards for something to make this mess smell a mite better." Jenna hurried down the stairs and came back with her hands full of spice boxes, rosemary, sage, and peppercorns. She emptied their contents into the black pot on the floor. Granny Bean spied my bottle of whiskey behind me and gestured towards it. "I'll be needing that, Crow." I grabbed it for her without question. She poured it into the pot and then threw in her lit cigarette. It went up in a blue flame, and Granny laughed, throwing back the remains of the whiskey. "This is when it gets fun, Crow. Sue, girl, get me the rest of that salt." Her daughter hurried to comply. Granny Bean turned back to me. "You got something of that girl's around here, don't you?" I pulled out the journals from my desk. "Please don't burn these." "No need. Just put them there next to that pot. Jerry Lynn, you get yourself ready." Jerry Lynn sat down with the journals in front of her. I could see her soul colors now, red and orange, gathering inward and intensifying. She spread the journals in a fan in front of her, running her hands over them. Mama Sue was moving around the edges of the room now, pouring a thin line of salt as she went and muttering something under her breath. The room seemed brighter, the light making everything more clearly outlined. Each woman's aura shone brighter than it had before. Mama Sue's golden yellow, Granny Bean's green, Jenna's lilac, and the baby's bright blue sparks. "Jenna, girl, you better head to that side for this one and just watch this time," said Granny Bean. "We don't know exactly what's going to be coming through with this one." Jenna stepped away into the foyer and beckoned me to follow. "Best to just let them do what they do, Ray." Granny Bean closed the doors behind me. I stood there with Jenna in an uncomfortable silence for a few minutes. I could hear the voices inside the church sanctuary, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Jenna shifted uncomfortably from foot to swollen foot. "You want to go sit in the kitchen with me? It's warm down there and there's places to sit. Or I could walk you home if you want." "How long do you think they're going to be?" I asked. "They will be as long as it takes," she said. She looked exhausted. "Do you want me to take you home?" I asked. She nodded yes. "We can walk. It'll be good for me to get some exercise," she said. "And being pregnant makes me hot anyway. Feels like I got a little furnace for a baby." We walked the short distance to her house. There was still some snow on the ground and in her neighborhood. As soon as we were inside, she sat down heavily on a recliner and put up her swollen feet. "Being pregnant's a lot of work, let me tell you," she said. "When are you due?" I asked, clearing a spot for myself on the floor in front of her. "Any day now," she said. "Your family?" I said. "What are they doing?" "Some people call it magic. Some people call it hoodoo," she said. "We've been doing this far back as we can remember. Granny Bean says her great-great-grandma was a Cherokee medicine woman. Her grandma was a medium back in the seance days, and we just carrying on the tradition. We all got different talents God gave us, and we just tries and use them the best as we can. Some people's good at figuring, some's good at reading, and we're good at knowing and seeing." "What are they trying to do in there?" I asked. my sister, can talk with them that's passed. She's going to find out what happened to your friend and if she's resting proper or not. Mama and Granny Bean is supervising. Granny Bean done said that she feels something big coming. She can see what's coming a long ways off. She knew my baby was going to be a girl before I even knew I was expecting. Mama's good with conjuring. She makes stuff happen a certain way, and she can talk with plants real good. And I'm just good at reading folks. Like I just sort of know who they are and what they're thinking. And I can see the dead folks when they want to be seen and talked, but not as good as my sister. They may not be the Fates, but they certainly were a part of Fate's plan in this situation. They were here to repair the tear in the tapestry left by Amanda's absence. If you don't mind, Ray, I'm going to close my eyes for a minute, said Jenna, laying her head back on the chair. They'll let me know when things is done with your friend. She closed her eyes, and within 10 minutes she was quietly snoring.